What's going on, everybody? My name is Greg Peters. You are watching the Car Passion channel. Today I will be discussing how to wire up a VVT engine into your 1.6 liter chassis. Now I know that is pretty specific, but the concepts I'll be covering in this video will help you swap any Miata engine into any other Miata, or really any engine into anything else. On top of that, I'll also cover what sensors I'm using from the 1.6, what sensors from the 1.8, and also how to wire up LS2 ignition coils, how to wire up flex fuel, and what components you need for that. I'm going to be touching on boost control, variable throttle position sensors. There's going to be a ton of information in this video, but it is still an overview. So if you guys are doing some of this stuff at home, I've included in the link in the description factory service manuals with all the OEM wiring diagrams, a wiring diagram that I made of my complete engine bay pretty much. I spent a very long time making just to post for you guys, as well as links to some of the parts and tools that I use. I try to always do that. So carpassionchannel.com/VVT wiring will get you to that page. And without further ado, let's jump into it. Please keep in mind that in this video, I'm showing you how I am wiring up my engine. I'm not saying it's necessarily the best way to do it. It's probably not, and I'm always open to criticism and comments telling me that I don't know what I'm doing, because sometimes that is the case. One thing I reference a lot that confuses people is when I say something is from a 1.6 or 1.8, because there are a few different Miatas that came with a 1.8. You have NA, NB1, NB2, they all came with different engines. So keep in mind that when I say 1.8 in this video, I mean something could come from any 1.8, NA or NB. If something needs to come from a specific car, I will say, hey, this needs to come from an NA8, this needs to come from an NB or an NB1 or an NB2, etc. So let's start digging into this thing and get wired. Now, if you guys are doing any engine swap, of course, research is the first thing you have to do before you buy a single part or turn a single bolt on your car. But if you are doing a Miata engine swap, you're in luck, because I've already done so much research here that I'm gonna post up just in this video and on my page. It's gonna save you guys a ton of time. Let's go down the list of wiring changes, starting with the throttle position sensor. Now, all 1.8 cars had a variable throttle position sensor, but the 1.6 cars did not. Luckily, the 1.6 liter harness has still got 3 wires in it, and those go to the right pins on the Megasquirt to where you can just solder in a variable TPS and it works. You may need to add a jumper in Megasquirt, but I'll cover that later. Now, TPS is very simple. On this NB unit, I've got a light green and red wire. That's the power wire. The ECU sends 5 volts into the TPS. Black and red, that's ground. Green and black is the signal wire. So the 5 volts goes in and the TPS changes the signal voltage so the ECU knows how open the throttle is. The more you open the throttle, the higher voltage comes out of this green wire, and the ECU knows that the throttle is opening. On your 1.6 liter harness, you've got a red wire for the 5 volt power, a black and green wire for the ground, and a white and green wire for the signal. So you just solder those into the appropriate wires on whatever TPS you're using, which could also be a TPS from another car. Nissans, BMWs, a lot of them are pretty easy to bolt on to your 1.6 liter to adapt to a variable throttle position sensor. Next is the idle speed control valve. Now on the NB, the ISCV is actually incorporated into the throttle body. It does not have an external port that you have to worry about plumbing into intercooler piping, so it's really clean and simple. It does all of its work inside the throttle body. So a lot of people go to the NB throttle body just for that feature. As far as wiring, the ISCV is pretty dumb. You've got 2 wires here, but it doesn't matter what color they are because this thing has no polarity. You just need a power and a signal. On the 1.6, the white and red wire is power, and the blue wire is signal, but again, you can cross those up on here. It doesn't matter at all. All you have to do is cut the old 1.6 plug off and add on an NB plug because they are slightly different. The VVT solenoid, another thing that's just not very smart. In fact, I'm glad I have Megasquirt to keep all these things in line, otherwise it would be complete chaos. The VVT solenoid does not have polarity. It's got 2 pins on it. One is for a 12 volt source. The other pin is a signal, which goes directly into the Megasquirt. That's what's going to control your VVT. It does not matter which pin gets power and which pin gets signal. The link in the description will show you where to buy this little VVT connector, as well as bring you to the website where I got a lot of my connectors from. The fuel injectors, those are a little more particular about how they get wired. Injectors have two pins as well. One is a 12 volt and the other is the signal. However, it does matter which pin goes to what, so for whatever injectors you're installing, make sure you pin them upright. Usually they'll have some sort of plus sign or something on them indicating which side is the 12 volt. In my case, inside where the plug goes, there's a little tiny positive sign on the left pin. That is the 12 volt pin. I pulled all of their 12 volt sources and the 12 volt for the VVT solenoid right from the factory plug, the red and white wire. For the signals on a 1.6 car, there are only two. 1 and 3 are on the same signal and 2 and 4 are on the same signal. But since I'm going to sequential injection, I'm just using the all yellow wire to signal injector 1, the yellow and black wire to signal injector 2, and then the other two injector signals for 3 and 4 are gonna go directly to the Mega Squirt. The VVT engine does not have a CAS like the NA6 and the NA8. Instead, they use a cam sensor, which is located on the rear of the intake cam, and a crank sensor, which is down there by the harmonic balancer. You'll use your existing CAS plug to wire into your two new sensors. The red and white is 12 volt power. You'll have to split that wire into two and run one of them to each of your new sensors. Black and yellow is ground. Same case, you've got to split it into two and run one lead to each sensor. Both of them need power and ground. The bottom wire, blue and yellow, that one is going to be your cam signal. And then the pure white one, the second from the bottom, that is your crank signal. On your cam sensor, 12 volt power is here, ground is here, and signal is here. Same concept on the crank sensor. Red is power, black is ground, and blue is signal. You do have to make one or two changes in Mega Squirt so it knows what to look for as far as what sensors your engine has, but I'll cover that when I get closer to starting the car up. For coolant temperature sensors, I'm using the stock 1.6 units. The 2-pin on the right is for the ECU, and the single blade on the left just powers the gauge in your cluster. Since you're using the original sensors, you don't have to make any modifications to the plugs. Remember this, old friend? If you've got a 1.6, it sits right here. Most people mistake it for a water temperature sensor, but it's actually just a thermal switch that turns the fans on and off. If you're running Mega Squirt, you don't need this anymore. A wideband O2 sensor and air-to-fuel ratio gauge is a standalone system, but they all have output signal wires that have to go to the ECU so it knows what your air-fuel ratio is. The signal wire can run directly to the ECU, or you can use your car's existing harness. If you have a 1.6 liter, there will be a single pin plug, and that's the one that's going to take your signal wire. If you've got a 1.8, you'll have a 4-pin plug. The blue wire is the one that you will run into for the wideband signal. Side note, don't forget these little guys. They're grounds, they're very important, and they need to be attached to bare metal. Factory, they're attached to the back of the intake manifold, and I've always found that that's a good place to put them. I have a factory 1.6 oil pressure sensor that just threads right in like the NB sensor would, and then I can use the factory harness plug. No modification necessary, and it also keeps your stock 1.6 oil pressure gauge functional. The alternator is from an NA8. The NB alternators require the ECU to regulate the voltage. Now the MS3 is capable of doing this, but it's so much more simple to just get an internally regulated alternator. The connectors are the same across all years, so you don't have to do any modification there, except the post, for whatever reason, is a little bit larger on the 1.8 alternator, so I had to remount that little eye hook just a tiny bit. I'm using a starter from an NB because it's smaller, it's lighter, and frankly, it just sounds better. And all the connections are the same on that as well. Hey, that's not factory. Nope, you're right. That's a flex fuel sensor. Now this car will have a flex setup, so it's going to have a 91 octane tune, an E85 tune, and then that sensor will tell Mega Squirt how much ethanol is in the fuel, and it will blend the fuel, ignition, and boost levels between the two tunes, giving me a power level that's safe for the fuel that I'm running in the car. Now on my 1.6, I did not have a flex setup. I just ran pure E85 all the time. A lot of people ask me how to do that. It's actually very simple. You just need a big enough fuel pump, big enough injectors, and a retune. That's all I had. Now on this car, I pretty much have the same thing, just with the flex fuel sensor added. And that's also a safety thing, even if you're running pure E85, because E85 is not always perfect 85% ethanol. If you get more ethanol content in the fuel, you will start running lean. If you get less ethanol content, you will start running rich. So it's good to have that sensor if you want some kind of longevity out of your engine. Just intercept any fuel line with this sensor, and then if you're running this one in particular, red is power, that's going to be a 12-volt source, yellow is ground, and green is your signal, which will run directly to Megasquirt. You will have an air intake temperature sensor that's going to replace your MAF or your AFM if you're on a 1.6. So that'll be somewhere like over here or over here or something. Anyways, you're going to run these 2 wire leads somewhere around the back of the engine. Plug them in to the first and the 6th port right there. Electronic boost control solenoid, another very simple device. Whether you've got a 4-port like mine or the traditional 3-port, they've got 2 wires coming out of them. One is a 12-volt and one is a signal. It does not matter which is which, there is no polarity. Again, the 12-volt can be fed from anywhere on the car, and the signal will go directly to your boost controller, in my case, Megasquirt. Alright, the part you've all been waiting for, how to wire up LS2 ignition coils into your Miata. One thing you will have to do is some custom plug wires. If you want to learn how to do that, I'll link that video in the end screen of this one. So you can buy these things from a junkyard, you can get them on eBay, you can get them a lot of different places. These are actually just some O'Reilly coils that have held up completely fine. It's probably best to get the OEM ones, but these work. And the LS coil is just one of the baddest coils on the market. You're not going to run out of spark power on a Miata engine with LS2 coils. And wiring them up is actually really easy. I should rephrase that and say the way that I have always wired them up is really easy and may not be the best way to do it, but it works. On the first coil, you can see a black, a brown, a purple, and a pink wire. Next coil back, black, brown, blue, and pink. Number 3, black, brown, green, and pink. Number 4, black, brown, red, and pink. Hopefully you've seen some similarities now. Every coil has black, brown, and pink. The blacks and browns coming off of each coil are all ground wires, and I've combined them all into that single black wire. The pink wire coming from all the harnesses is a 12-volt source. I've combined all the pinks into that single pink wire right there. The colors that are different on each coil are signals, so each coil has a different signal color: purple, red, blue, and green. I always ran my 1.6 in a wasted spark configuration and I never had a problem with it. That means 1 and 4 and 2 and 3 are on the same channel. They're always firing at the same time. The only time I could ever see this being a problem is if you're running really high RPM or really high dwell, which is going to overwork the coil, because in a wasted spark configuration the coils are firing twice as much as they need to. But I'm still going to try it that way on this motor and see if it works. Side note, I did get all these plugs just from a factory GM harness, and then I modified the harness itself to fit like this, which you guys saw in the last video. Now comes the fun part of wiring those coils into your car. Now let me take you to this clip real quick that I took from Broken Boosted in preparation for this video to show you where my igniter went. So on the stock 1.6, part of your ignition system right there is called the igniter. You have one big plug that goes into it, and there's some signals that go into it and some signals that come back out. When you convert to the LS coils, you get rid of that whole igniter. So you'll unplug that completely and just hack this entire plug off, and then you'll be working with some of the wires that are left behind that plug. Keep in mind that this wiring will be for a 1.6, but now that you know the simple concepts of what each wire is for off of the coils, you could really put this on any car. And you know, I've never tried to hook them up on a stock ECU, but I don't see why you couldn't do it. I also don't see why you would need to, but that's just what I'm thinking about. So after you hack off your igniter plug and get rid of the igniter, you're left with a bunch of loose ends. You've got a white and a red in this little side harness. You will not use those anymore. You've got a black and white. You will not use that anymore. The only ones you will use are the ground, unless you ground the coils at the head. So this one's really optional. I do use this power wire. Blue is power. That will supply the 12 volts to the coil, so you'll hook that up to the pink wire. The brown and yellow wire will hook up to cylinder 1 and 4. The wire that's all brown is going to hook up to cylinder 2 and 3. And again, I will have a full wiring diagram of this in the link below. Once you wire the coils up, unfortunately your tack will not work. But if you're running Mega Squirt, it has a pin called tack out, and that is a tack signal which you will solder into the yellow and blue wire. Once that's in, your tack will work. Now I am remembering something about a resistor. It goes from the plus B to the G minus pin. You might have to do some research on that. If you wire up the LS coils like this and your tack doesn't work, you might have to add that resistor. Let me know if anyone knows about that. Alright, I know you learned something in that video, so smash that like button. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below. Please check out that link in the description if you're looking for more information, or if your question wasn't answered in this video. It's probably there, but if it's not, as always, drop me a comment, shoot me a snap, hit me up on Instagram, whatever it takes. I'll try to get your questions answered as quickly as I can. I will see you guys in the next video. We're getting even closer. Peace out.
Back from the dead.